This is the new DJI Transmission. It is a wireless video system that can transmit HD video up to 6 kilometers or 3.7 miles, can control your camera wirelessly, record proxy files onto an SD card, includes a 1500 nit 7-inch display that can also be used as a regular monitor, and much more. Before we dive into the full review, a quick disclaimer. DJI did send me this gear to review, but they are not sponsoring this video. This video is, however, supported by those of you who have purchased my camera guides and LUTs. You can learn more via the link in the description, and thank you guys so much for the support. It really does mean a lot. So now let's dive into the DJI Transmission system and talk about what comes in the box. While you can buy parts of the system individually, the DJI Transmission Combo Kit offers the best bang for buck. In the nice hard case, you'll find the transmitter, high bright remote monitor, monitor hood, power adapter plates for both the monitor and the transmitter, a gimbal adapter plate, 2 batteries and a charger, cables for every occasion, and spare antennas. Unlike a lot of included cases, this one is actually very usable on set as everything fits without a lot of fuss, and I always love seeing that. This new wireless system from DJI is made primarily up of 2 parts, the transmitter and the receiver / high bright remote monitor. Let's first focus on the transmitter. When it comes to inputs and outputs, we're looking at HDMI and SDI, and there's also an HDMI output, meaning you can do cross conversion, have HDMI go in, and also be able to convert to SDI for other things like a monitor on your rig. And on the opposite side, we have the controls, including power on and off, a menu wheel, and a back button. There's an OLED screen showing some basic helpful information and a simple menu system that is controlled with a single dial and push button. For power, you can use one of 2 battery plates, one for the DJI WB37 batteries and one for Sony MPF batteries. There's also a 6-pin power input on the side if you want to power this whole system with something like a DTAP battery. I should also note that there are some connection pins on both sides of the transmitter, so we could see third-party manufacturers make all kinds of different adapters. Hopefully we'll see some fun things like that from other companies soon. For mounting, we have several threads on the bottom of the transmitter, and DJI has also included a plate that allows you to mount the transmitter underneath a gimbal. And last but not least, we have 4 total antennas, 2 on the sides and 2 on the top. If you need higher quality connection or longer range, you can also go out and buy the high gain antenna set, which comes with larger antennas and extension cables, so you could put all of your antennas on a pole and get it at the top of your set somewhere and have insane range. Next up, we have the high bright remote monitor, which has a ton of features built in. First and foremost, it is actually a receiver, as you can see from the 4 antenna across the top. Those can also be upgraded to the high gain antennas, and obviously beyond that, it's also a display, 1500 nits, 1080p in a 7-inch form factor. But you're not stuck using it as a receiver. You can also use the HDMI input on the side to connect it to any camera and use it as a regular monitor. There's also a headphone jack, which means you can wirelessly monitor audio, a USB jack for firmware updates, and there is also a micro SD card slot, which can be used to record proxy H.264 files, which is awesome to see, and you can even set up your camera to trigger this recorder to start recording wirelessly over HDMI. The monitor also has a ton of great video assist tools, and all of them are implemented smartly and they work really well. But one of my favorite features is the camera menu control. That's right, any Sony camera that supports Bravia HDMI control can be controlled from the remote monitor. All you have to do is turn HDMI control and info display on in your camera. Then you can display the virtual widget on the remote monitor, and just like that, you can now go into the menu system on the remote monitor and browse the camera's menu, as well as make changes all wirelessly, which is really fantastic if you're a Sony user. The monitor also ships with a cage pre-installed, but you can remove it if desired. And if you use this monitor with DJI products, you can install the DJI hand grips, which I've used on the Ronin 4D and absolutely love. Now, I'm reviewing this system as someone who uses it exclusively for video transmission and some menu access like we talked about. But if you have a DJI 4D or other DJI gimbals, this even adds more functionality, allowing you to control the gimbal wirelessly and have a ton of tools on screen and with those remote grips. So a lot of functionality there. If you don't own those things, you can do what I've done here and rig up your own wireless setup for use with any camera. I've customized this with 2 different rigs. The first is a really basic one where I added NATO rails to the side of the monitor cage and slapped on a couple easily removable small rig handles. And if you want to go all out, I've built an insane rig with Tilta Nucleus M handles for wireless focus and camera start stopping, and I've added a V-mount plate to the back of the monitor to power everything from a single battery. If you want to see a tutorial on how I built this, stay tuned for a video or live stream where I'll break this setup down. The remote monitor shares the same battery options as the transmitter, Sony batteries or DJI batteries, and there's an optional expansion accessory that you see right here, which will give you an additional DC input as well as HDMI and SDI out. Unfortunately, it's $500 and you have to purchase it on top of everything else. Otherwise, there's a nice tidy plate that just covers up that part of the monitor. Then we have range, which is absolutely bananas on this system. So on the spec sheet, we're looking at 6 kilometers or 3.7 miles, and that is line of sight between the transmitter and the receiver. I ran several tests and just couldn't believe what I was able to do with this. One test was a mile-long road with the transmitter in one car and the receiver in another. A mile down the road, the signal was still strong and image quality was great. Next, I drove through a neighborhood and put several houses and trees between the transmitter and the receiver and was able to get about 1,000 feet before I lost connection. I've also used this system indoors with amazing results, so I would feel very comfortable using this several rooms away, in some cases floors away from each other. This studio is a metal and concrete building and I've had no issues using the system, and I've also used it in a basement of a much larger building, and it was wild how far we could separate these two devices and still have a really good connection. As distance and obstacles between the two devices increase, DJI's transmission system will automatically switch between 2.4 gigahertz, 5.8 gigahertz, and DFS with up to 23 channels to choose from. You can see all this on the connection menu of the HiBright remote monitor, and if you so desire, you can switch from auto to manual and choose which channels you'd prefer and want to lock onto. The max bitrate of this transmission is going to be 50 megabits a second, and that will drop over time as you get further and further away so that the signal remains strong. You can also purchase the high gain antennas to improve the quality of connection, and these kits come with extension cables, so you could rig up a pole or a car on set to try to keep line of sight. This wireless system has 2 different operating modes, control and broadcast. In control mode, up to 2 remote monitors can connect to a single transmitter and you can control it. In broadcast mode, there is no limit to the number of receivers that connect to the transmitter, but your range is going to be reduced and you're not going to have as many features. As great as all of this is, there are some downsides to the system, and some of those downsides might be deal breakers depending on your needs. There are 2 big ones for me in particular, and I'll have those at the end. First up is the weight of the transmitter. It's a little more than I'd like, and while the build quality and materials are incredible, that comes at a cost of weight. Even with a small battery, this thing is just really heavy, and it might be an issue depending on your rig setup. The next con is that you can only transmit 1080p up to 60 frames per second, and the system only accepts 1080p signals. So you have to set your camera to output 1080p. I wish this thing had a built-in downscaler, but it is what it is. And then we have the fan noise. Both of these devices have fans, and while the transmitter isn't too bad, the receiver is insane sometimes depending on the environment you're in. I'll go ahead and do a sound test here. So I'm just gonna take this thing, put it roughly where I am and turn it on. That's full tilt on the transmitter, and over time it will go down. Now we have the bright monitor, which sounds like a jet when it first turns on. And then calms down as it is running, and over the course of the day, it'll kind of go up and go down. And I found for the most part indoors, it'll often just chill out after a while, but it's definitely somewhat loud. Then we have the price. Now, I think it's fair for what this system can do, but you do have to think twice about what you actually need in a wireless system. So for the combo kit, which is what we've been talking about in this video, you're looking at $2,500 for the case and all the accessories and things that we've talked about. I honestly feel that this system is not complete without that expansion unit for the HiBright monitor, and that is $500 just to get that puppy and add it to the system. So now we're looking at $3,000. And at that price of $3,000, you could go out and purchase 2 Teradek Ace systems, but those are kind of apples and oranges. Their range is not even close to what this can do. It doesn't have a HiBright monitor with proxy recordings, camera control, and all the other stuff we've talked about in this video. And if you want an additional transmitter, you're looking at around $1,000 per transmitter. Beyond that, if you want the high gain antenna system, that'll be $89 for 4. So if you want everything to have those cables and those giant, antennas, you're looking at another $180. And then there are two big issues I have with this system. The first is that there is no dedicated receiver. You can buy as many transmitters as you want, but you have to get the high bright remote monitor to receive those signals. I really hope that DJI decides to come out with a dedicated receiver, something about this form factor that we could use with any monitor, instead of being stuck with just the remote monitor. As it stands, if you want to then repeat the signal or have other displays, you're gonna have to connect to the remote monitor's output. And the last issue I have with this system is going to be latency. Now, while the system stays connected incredibly well when you're within range or line of sight, it's definitely not the fastest when it comes to latency. You're going to get range with this system, but poorer latency, whereas a lot of other systems like my Paralinx Ace system, you're going to get really great latency, but the range just isn't going to be as good. As for final recommendations, if you need an all-in-one wireless monitoring solution and your main concern is going to be range and connection stability, you're not going to beat this system right now. It is amazing how well it has worked for me, and I do really enjoy the receiver being built in with a monitor and having the options to customize it like we've talked about. I do really hope that DJI continues to develop this ecosystem and offers more options when it comes to accessories. Things like that dedicated receiver would be fantastic to see. And that is going to wrap up this review. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to support the channel, check out the information down in the description. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you in the next video.